The champagne glass exploded in her hand before she heard the shot. Amara looked up into the eyes of Seoul's most ruthless prosecutor as he threw his body over hers. And in that split second, she realized two things. Someone wanted her dead, and the man protecting her was about to become dangerously obsessed with keeping her alive. What she didn't know was that surviving the bullets would be easier than surviving his love. Welcome to Black and Soul TV, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. The charity gala at the Grand Walker Hill Hotel had been perfect until the gunfire started. Amara Brooks had been nursing her second glass of champagne, trying to look comfortable in a dress that cost more than her monthly rent, when the world exploded into violence. She was a cultural liaison for an international law firm, invited to these events to smile and make connections. She wasn't supposed to end up on the floor with Seoul's most feared prosecutor shielding her body with his own. Min-ho's jaw was clenched so tight, she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. His hands were shaking as they moved over her shoulders, her arms, checking for injuries with a desperation that seemed excessive for a stranger. "You're bleeding," he said, his voice rough. His fingers touched her cheek and came away red. "Just glass," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm fine." "You're not fine." His eyes blazed with something fierce and protective. "Stay down." He rose in one fluid movement, his body positioning itself between her and the shooters. Amara watched, stunned, as he barked orders to security, coordinated the evacuation, and moved through the chaos like a man born for war. This wasn't the cold prosecutor she'd seen on television. This was something primal and terrifying. When the police arrived and secured the scene, Min-ho returned to her, kneeling beside where she still sat on the floor. His hand cupped her face again, thumb brushing away blood with a gentleness that made her breath catch. "You need medical attention," he said quietly. "I'm taking you to the hospital. I can take care of myself." His eyes met hers, and something in that gaze made her pulse stutter. "Not tonight. Tonight you're under my protection." Before she could argue, he lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. Amara should have protested, should have demanded to be put down, but his arms felt like the safest place in the world. And that terrified her more than the bullets had. The next morning, Amara woke in a hospital room filled with flowers. White roses, orchids, peonies, every surface covered in blooms that must have cost a fortune. A card sat on the bedside table in sharp, elegant handwriting. "You're safe now. That's all that matters. KMH. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. She'd been treated and released with just a few stitches, but someone had arranged for a private room overnight for observation. Someone with power and money and an intensity that should have sent her running. Her phone buzzed with texts from her colleagues, news alerts about the shooting, messages from her boss asking if she was all right. But it was the unknown number that made her pause. "I need to see you. There are things you need to know about last night. Things that put you in danger. Meet me at my office at noon." The message was unsigned, but she knew who it was from. Prosecutor Kang Min-ho didn't ask, he commanded. And despite every instinct telling her to stay away, Amara found herself texting back a simple yes. Min-ho's office at the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's office was exactly what she expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, dark wood furniture, shelves lined with law books and case files. What she didn't expect was the way he looked at her when she entered. Like she was something precious he'd almost lost. Like seeing her standing there, alive and whole, was the only thing keeping him together. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Then he poured her tea with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. "Last night wasn't random," he began, his voice carefully controlled. "The shooters were targeting me. You were caught in the crossfire because you were standing too close." "I'm sorry. Why are you apologizing?" Amara asked, confused. "You saved my life and endangered it by existing in the same space." His eyes were dark with something that looked like guilt and fury mixed together. "I've made enemies. Dangerous ones. The Kim crime family I'm prosecuting, they wanted to send a message." Amara absorbed this information, her hands wrapped around the warm teacup. "So what happens now?" "Now you need protection until the trial ends. I've arranged for security. They'll be discreet but constant." Min-ho's jaw tightened. "I won't let them touch you again. You barely know me." His eyes locked on hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "That doesn't seem to matter." Something in his tone made her skin warm. This was dangerous territory, getting involved with a man like him. But when he looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, walking away felt impossible. The following week, Amara discovered that Min-ho's idea of discreet security meant a constant shadow. A black sedan followed her to work, bodyguards positioned at every entrance of her building, and twice she caught glimpses of Min-ho himself watching from across the street. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it made her feel cherished in a way that terrified her. He was consuming her thoughts, invading her dreams, and she'd barely spent an hour in his presence. On Thursday evening, her colleague Marcus invited her to dinner. He was charming, American like her, easy to talk to. They went to a trendy restaurant in Gangnam, and Amara tried to relax, to pretend her life hadn't become a thriller novel. But halfway through the meal, she felt it. That prickling awareness of being watched. She turned and saw him. Min-ho sat alone at a corner table, still in his court suit, his eyes fixed on her with an expression that made her stomach flip. Marcus noticed her distraction and followed her gaze. "Friend of yours?" "Something like that," Amara murmured. Marcus smiled and reached across the table to touch her hand. "Well, he looks ready to commit murder. Maybe we should invite him over." Before Amara could respond, Min-ho was standing at their table. His presence was overwhelming, controlled fury barely restrained beneath expensive tailoring. His eyes fixed on where Marcus's hand touched hers. "Mr. Brooks," Min-ho said, his voice deadly soft. "I need to speak with Ms. Brooks. It's urgent." "It's Marcus, actually," her colleague corrected with easy American friendliness. "And we're kind of in the middle of dinner here, so maybe you could call her later?" Min-ho's smile didn't reach his eyes. It wasn't a request. Amara saw the danger in his expression, the possessiveness that had no right to exist, but blazed there anyway. She stood quickly, her hand touching Min-ho's arm. "It's fine, Marcus. I'll call you tomorrow." Outside the restaurant, Min-ho's control finally cracked. "Who is he?" "A colleague. Just a colleague. We were having dinner." His hand caught her wrist, not hard but firm, possessive. "You're under protection because people want to hurt you to get to me. Having dinner with strange men isn't safe." "Marcus isn't strange, and I don't need your permission to live my life." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "You do when your life is connected to mine. When the thought of someone else touching you makes me want to burn the world down." The confession hung between them, raw and shocking. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. "You have no right to feel that way." "I know." His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist, finding her racing pulse. "Doesn't change the fact that I do." He stepped closer, and she could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body. "From the moment I covered you with my body at that gala, something changed. You became mine to protect, mine to keep safe. And the thought of anyone else having what I want makes me lose my mind." "This is crazy," she whispered, but she didn't pull away. "We barely know each other." "Then let me know you." His hand cupped her face, tilting it up to meet his gaze. "Let me take you to dinner. Let me show you who I am when I'm not in a courtroom destroying lives. Let me prove that this thing between us isn't just protection or obligation. It's something real." Amara knew she should say no. Knew getting involved with him was dangerous and complicated and probably insane. But when he looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life, she couldn't find the word. The next evening, Min-ho picked her up in his personal car, a sleek black sedan he drove himself. No bodyguards, no security detail, just the two of them. He took her to a small restaurant hidden in an alley in Buckshin, the kind of place that didn't have a sign and only seated 8 people. The owner greeted Min-ho like family, and they were led to a private room overlooking a traditional garden. "Tell me about yourself," he said after they'd ordered. "The real you, not the professional version." Amara found herself talking about growing up in Chicago, about her Nigerian mother and American father, about feeling caught between cultures until she discovered her love for languages and bridge building. She told him about moving to Seoul 3 years ago, about falling in love with the city's energy and complexity. And as she talked, Min-ho listened with complete focus, like every word mattered, like she was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. "What about you?" she asked finally. "Who is Prosecutor Kang Min-ho when he's not terrifying criminals?" A slight smile touched his lips. "I was raised to be perfect. My father is a retired judge, my mother comes from old money. I was expected to be the best at everything, to never show weakness, to never fail. The courtroom is where I'm most comfortable because the rules are clear and emotions don't matter. But since nothing feels clear anymore." Since me? Since I looked up and saw you holding that champagne glass, laughing at something your colleague said. So beautiful you made the whole room fade. Since the bullet came and my only thought was getting to you. Since I realized I'd die to keep you safe. The intensity of his confession made her chest tight. You don't even know me, she repeated, but the words felt hollow now. His hand reached across the table, fingers intertwining with hers. I know you're brave. You didn't scream when the shooting started. You stayed calm. I know you're kind because you thanked the paramedics even when you were in shock. I know you're strong because you're sitting here with me instead of running away from the danger I bring. And I know that when I touch you, your pulse races the same way mine does. Their food arrived, but neither of them moved. The air between them crackled with tension, with unspoken desire, with something bigger than both of them. Min-ho's thumb traced circles on her palm, the touch innocent but electric. I want to kiss you, he said quietly. But I'm afraid if I start, I won't be able to stop. Then don't stop, she whispered, and watched his control shatter. He was around the table in seconds, pulling her to her feet, his hands framing her face as his mouth claimed hers. The kiss was devastating, desperate, like he was trying to pour everything he felt into the press of lips and tongue. Amara's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, drowning in the taste of him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. You're mine now, he said, and it wasn't a question. Say it. I'm yours, she breathed, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. The following days blurred together in a haze of stolen moments and growing intimacy. Min-ho would appear at her office with lunch, claiming he was in the neighborhood. He'd text her throughout the day, simple messages that made her smile. Thinking of you. Be safe. Can't wait to see you tonight. His possessiveness should have felt suffocating, but instead made her feel cherished. When a client tried to flirt with her during a business dinner, Min-ho showed up unexpected, his hand settling possessively on her lower back as he introduced himself as her boyfriend. The client backed off immediately. That night, Min-ho took her to his penthouse apartment in Gangnam, a sleek space of glass and steel softened by warm lighting and carefully chosen art. He poured them wine, and they stood at the window overlooking the glittering city. I shouldn't want you this much, he said quietly. It makes me vulnerable. Makes me weak. You're the least weak person I've ever met. He turned to face her, his eyes dark with desire and something deeper. You don't understand. In my world, caring about someone is a liability. It gives enemies leverage. But with you, I can't help it. I care so much it scares me. Amara set down her wine glass and moved closer, her hands sliding up his chest. Maybe being scared isn't always bad. Maybe it means you're finally living instead of just surviving. His arms came around her, pulling her flush against him. You make me want to be better. Make me want to be the man who deserves you instead of the monster everyone thinks I am. You're not a monster. His laugh was bitter. I've destroyed lives, ruined families, sent people to prison without mercy. I'm exactly what they say I am. Then show me, she challenged, her hands cupping his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. Show me the monster. Let me see the worst of you and decide for myself. What she saw in his expression took her breath away. Vulnerability and need, and a longing so deep it seemed endless. He kissed her again, softer this time, reverent. His hands trembled as they traced her curves, mapping her body like she was something sacred. When he lifted her into his arms and carried her to his bedroom, it felt inevitable. Right. Like every moment had been leading to this. Their coming together was intense and overwhelming, a clash of need and emotion that left them both shaking. Min-ho worshipped her body with hands and mouth, his touch possessive but tender, claiming her completely while giving himself just as fully. When they finally joined, his eyes never left hers, and she saw everything he felt reflected there. Adoration, possession, something that looked terrifyingly like love. You're everything, he breathed against her lips. Everything I didn't know I needed. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers trailing patterns on her bare shoulder. The world outside could wait. For now, there was only this moment, this connection, this feeling of finally being exactly where she belonged. I could stay here forever, she murmured, already half asleep. Then stay, he said, pressing a kiss to her hair. Stay with me. Don't leave. But when Amara woke before dawn, reality crashed back with brutal clarity. She was lying in bed with Seoul's most powerful prosecutor, A man who attracted danger like a magnet. A man whose enemies would see her as a perfect target. A man who made her feel things that terrified her with their intensity. What had she done? Moving carefully, she slipped from the bed and gathered her clothes. Min-ho slept deeply, exhausted from their night together, and she allowed herself one last look at his face, peaceful in a way it never was when he was awake. Then she left, taking a taxi home in the gray morning light, her heart breaking with every mile that separated them. By the time her phone started ringing with his calls, she was already packing. By the time he showed up at her apartment, she was already gone. Amara ran because she was terrified, not of him, but of how much she needed him. Not of the danger he brought, but of how willingly she'd walk into fire if he asked. She ran because staying meant accepting that her life would never be safe or simple again. And she wasn't sure she was brave enough for that. She went to her friend's apartment in Busan, a city far enough from Seoul to feel like escape. She turned off her phone and tried to convince herself she'd made the right choice. But every night, she dreamed of his hands on her skin, his voice saying her name, his eyes looking at her like she was his whole world. And every morning, she woke with tears on her face. 3 days later, there was a knock on her friend's door. Amara opened it to find Min-ho standing there, still in his court suit, looking like he hadn't slept since she'd left. His eyes found hers, and the pain there nearly brought her to her knees. "Why did you run?" "Because I'm scared," she admitted, the words breaking on a sob. "You make me feel too much. You make me want things I can't have. You think you're the only one who's terrified?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You think I'm not scared of what you do to me? Of how completely you've destroyed every defense I've ever built? I can't be with you," she said, even as her heart screamed the opposite. "Your world is too dangerous. Someone will use me to hurt you. Let them try." His voice was deadly soft. "Let them come for you, and see what happens when they threaten what's mine. I will burn down this entire city before I let anyone touch you. Don't you understand? You're not a liability. You're the only thing that makes me human. The only thing that makes any of this matter." He crossed the distance between them, his hands framing her face. "I love you, Amara. I've loved you since the moment I saw you at that gala. Since I felt your heartbeat against mine and knew I'd found something worth living for. Something worth dying for. Don't ask me to let you go. Ask me for anything else, and I'll give it to you. But don't ask me to survive without you." The tears came then, hot and fast, and his thumbs brushed them away as he kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you too," she whispered against his mouth. "I love you so much it terrifies me. Then be terrified with me." His arms came around her, holding her like he'd never let go. "Be scared and stay anyway. Fight with me. Choose me. Choose us." And when she nodded, when she said yes, when she let him carry her back to Seoul and back into his life, it felt like coming home. But the peace didn't last. 2 weeks later, the Kim family made their move. Amara was leaving work when a van pulled up, when hands grabbed her, when a cloth pressed over her face, and the world went dark. She woke in a cold room, zip-tied to a chair, her head pounding. A man she recognized from news coverage stood before her. Kim Sang-woo, the head of the crime family Min-ho was prosecuting. The man who had everything to lose if the trial continued. "You're going to call your prosecutor boyfriend," Kim said with a smile that made her skin crawl. "You're going to tell him to drop the charges. Or we're going to hurt you in ways that will break him." "Never," Amara said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You don't know him at all if you think threatening me will make him back down." "Oh, I know him very well." Kim's smile widened. "I know he's never cared about anyone before you. I know he's ruthless in court, but soft when it comes to protecting the innocent. And I know that watching you suffer will destroy him." The beating started then, methodical and calculated. They didn't want to kill her, just hurt her enough to send a message. But Amara had grown up with brothers, had taken self-defense classes, had learned to be strong. She endured, keeping her teeth clenched, refusing to scream, refusing to give them the satisfaction. And all the while, she thought of Min-ho, thought of his promise to protect her, thought of the fury in his eyes when anyone threatened what was his. Hours passed. Maybe days, she lost track. Then she heard it. Gunfire. Shouting. The door exploding inward with a crash that shook the walls. And suddenly he was there. Min-ho, covered in blood that probably wasn't his, moving through the room like an avenging angel. He killed the 2 guards without hesitation, without mercy, his gun steady even as his hands shook when he cut her restraints. His face when he saw her injuries made him look like death itself. Who hurt you? All of them, she whispered, and watched something terrible and beautiful pass through his expression. Good. They're all dead then. He lifted her carefully, his jaw tight with controlled rage. I'm getting you out. Then I'm coming back and burning this place to the ground with everyone in it. The extraction was violent and efficient. Min-ho's security team had tracked her phone's last location, had coordinated with police, had come in with overwhelming force. But Min-ho himself had gone in first, alone, because waiting wasn't an option when she was in danger. He carried her to the ambulance, refusing to let the paramedics take her from his arms until they reached the hospital. In the emergency room, as doctors treated her injuries, Min-ho stood against the wall, his eyes never leaving her. His hands were still covered in blood. His suit was torn. He looked like a warrior who'd just returned from battle. And when their eyes met, she saw everything he felt. The terror of almost losing her. The rage at those who'd hurt her. The overwhelming relief that she was alive. And underneath it all, love so fierce it took her breath away. Later, after she'd been treated and admitted for observation, he sat beside her bed and took her hand in both of his. I failed you, he said quietly. I promised to keep you safe, and I failed. You didn't fail. You saved me. I should have protected you better. Should have seen this coming. His voice broke. When I got the call that you'd been taken, something inside me died. The thought of losing you, of this world existing without you in it, was unbearable. You didn't lose me. She squeezed his hand. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing kisses to her bruised knuckles. I want you to move in with me, into my apartment where I can keep you safe. I want you to marry me, to bind yourself to me so completely that no one will ever question who you belong to. This isn't a proposal, not yet, but it's a promise. When this trial is over, when you've healed, I'm going to ask you properly, and I need you to say yes. Why? She asked softly. Why do you need me to say yes? Because you're my heart, he said simply. Because I was half alive before you, going through the motions, doing my job, existing but not living. Because you make me want to be better, to be softer, to be the kind of man who deserves love. Because when I thought I'd lost you, I realized that nothing else matters. Not my career, not my reputation, not justice or revenge or any of it. Just you. Only you. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she pulled him closer, her lips finding his in a kiss that tasted like salt and promises. Yes, she whispered. When you ask, my answer will be yes. He kissed her again, deeper, his hand cradling her face like she was infinitely precious. Then I'll spend every day until then proving that you made the right choice. Proving that loving me isn't a mistake. Proving that I'll spend the rest of my life keeping you safe and making you happy. The trial ended 3 weeks later with a conviction. Kim Sang-woo and his entire organization were dismantled, sent to prison for crimes that would keep them locked away for life. Min-ho's testimony was devastating, his evidence irrefutable, his closing argument a masterpiece of controlled fury. And through it all, Amara sat in the gallery, wearing the ring he'd given her the night before. An emerald surrounded by diamonds, unique and bold and perfect. The proposal had come at his apartment, with candles and rose petals, and a vulnerability in his eyes that made her cry. He'd gotten down on one knee and told her she was his beginning and end, his reason and redemption, his everything. And when she'd said yes, when she'd let him slide the ring on her finger, it felt like the world clicking into place. 6 months later, they married in a private ceremony at a traditional hanok in Bukshan. Amara wore a custom cream gown that celebrated her curves, and Min-ho couldn't stop touching her, his hand always finding hers, his eyes never leaving her face. When he said his vows, his voice broke on the words. You saved me, he said, from a life of coldness and isolation, from a future where I never knew what it meant to truly love someone. Thank you for being brave enough to stay. Thank you for choosing me. Her own vows were equally emotional. You showed me that strength comes in many forms, she said. That protection isn't weakness and possession isn't control when it comes from love. You make me feel cherished and safe and seen. And I promise to spend every day reminding you that you're not the monster you think you are. You're my hero, my love, my home. The reception was small and intimate, just close friends and family. Min-ho's father made a toast about finally seeing his son smile, about the light Amara had brought to his eyes. And as they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Min-ho whispered in her ear, "I'm going to spend forever showing you how much I love you. Forever won't be long enough, but it's a start." 1 year later, Amara stood in their apartment, looking at the positive pregnancy test in her hands. Min-ho found her there, frozen with shock and joy, and when she showed him the test, he swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure happiness. "We're having a baby," she said, still unable to believe it. "You're going to be a father. Best news I've ever received," he said, setting her down gently, his hand immediately going to her still flat stomach. "This child is going to be so loved, so protected, so wanted." And as he knelt before her, pressing kisses to her belly, whispering promises to their unborn child, Amara felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. This man who the world saw as cold and merciless was kneeling at her feet with tears in his eyes, overcome with love for a baby they hadn't even met yet. This was their happy ending, their new beginning, their forever. The pregnancy transformed Min-ho in ways Amara hadn't anticipated. The man who commanded courtrooms with icy precision became obsessively protective, hovering over her like she might shatter at any moment. He insisted on driving her everywhere, personally vetted everything she ate, and once actually growled at a stranger who bumped into her at the grocery store. "You're being ridiculous," she told him one evening as he placed pillows around her on the couch for the third time. "I'm 2 months pregnant, not made of glass." His hand settled on her stomach, his expression serious. "You're carrying the most precious thing in my world. I'm allowed to be protective. There's protective and there's suffocating." She softened her tone, covering his hand with hers. "I love that you care, but I need to still live my life." The internal struggle played across his face, the war between his instinct to shield her from everything and his respect for her independence. Finally, he nodded. "I'll try to be less intense. But if anyone so much as looks at you wrong, all bets are off." The next few months passed in a blur of doctor's appointments and nursery planning. Min-ho threw himself into preparing for fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to everything. He read every parenting book he could find, interviewed pediatricians with the thoroughness of a prosecutor, and personally assembled every piece of furniture for the nursery. Watching him struggle with crib instructions, his hair disheveled and his shirt sleeves rolled up, made Amara fall in love with him all over again. At 4 months, they found out they were having a girl. Min-ho cried when the ultrasound technician announced it, his hand squeezing Amara's so tightly she lost circulation. "A daughter," he whispered reverently. "We're having a daughter." His eyes met hers, shining with emotion. "She's going to have your strength and beauty. She's going to be perfect." "She already is," Amara said, watching their baby's heartbeat flutter on the screen. "Because she's ours." But happiness in their world was never simple. At 6 months pregnant, Amara received a threatening letter at work. It was crude and explicit, detailing what the sender wanted to do to her and their unborn child, signed with the symbol of a gang Min-ho had helped dismantle years ago. When Min-ho saw it, something in him went deadly quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. "Pack a bag," he said calmly. "You're not going back to that office. You're not going anywhere without a security team. And I'm going to find whoever sent this and make them wish they'd never been born." The security became oppressive. Armed guards at every entrance of their building. Cameras everywhere. Min-ho insisting she stay home most days, working remotely, seeing only approved visitors. Amara understood his fear, shared it even, but the cage was closing in. "I can't live like this," she told him one night, her hand on her swollen belly. "Our daughter is going to be born into a fortress. She'll never know what it's like to feel free. She'll be alive." Min-ho countered, his voice hard. "That's what matters. Being alive and safe trumps being free." They fought about it, really fought, for the first time since they'd married. Amara accused him of letting fear control him. He accused her of not taking the threat seriously enough. The argument ended with both of them in tears, her sobbing from hormones and frustration, him holding her and apologizing even though neither of them knew how to fix the fundamental problem. They loved each other desperately, but love couldn't eliminate the danger that came with his past. The next morning, Min-ho came to her with a proposal. "What if we left?" he asked quietly. "After the baby is born, what if we moved somewhere safer? I could practice law anywhere. You could open your own consulting firm. We could give our daughter a normal childhood. You'd give up everything you've built here? For you?" For her? His hand covered hers on her belly. In a heartbeat. My career means nothing if I lose you. My reputation means nothing if our child grows up afraid. I want you both safe more than I want anything else in this world. Amara felt her heart crack open with love for this man. The great prosecutor Kang Min-ho, willing to walk away from everything for his family. But she also knew him well enough to understand what that sacrifice would cost. You'd resent it eventually, she said gently. This is who you are. Fighting for justice, protecting people who can't protect themselves. I won't ask you to give that up. Then what do we do? The vulnerability in his voice broke her. Because I can't lose you, Amara. I won't survive it. We fight, she said firmly. We take precautions, we stay smart, but we don't let fear win. We live our lives and raise our daughter to be brave. And we trust that together, we're stronger than anything that comes at us. He pulled her close as her pregnant belly allowed, his face buried in her neck. You're so much braver than me, he murmured. I'm terrified every second of every day. Then be terrified and love us anyway, she whispered, echoing the words he'd once said to her. Be scared and stay. Fight for us. Choose us. Always, he promised. Always. At 7 months pregnant, they finally caught the person behind the threats. It turned out to be the younger brother of someone Min-ho had prosecuted, a kid barely 20 who'd thought threatening a pregnant woman would somehow avenge his family. Min-ho could have destroyed him, could have used his power and connections to ensure the maximum punishment. Instead, he met with the kid personally, with Amara's blessing, and they talked. Really talked. About justice and revenge and the cycle of violence that destroyed lives on both sides. The kid broke down, apologizing, admitting he'd been stupid and angry and lost. Min-ho got him a job and a chance at a clean start, proving that mercy was sometimes stronger than vengeance. When Amara heard about it, she cried, overwhelmed by the goodness in the man she'd married. This is who you really are, she told him. Not the cold prosecutor everyone fears, but the man who believes in second chances. The man who chooses compassion when he could choose cruelty. He kissed her softly. You make me want to be that man. Before you, I didn't know how. The threats ended after that. The security relaxed slightly, and they could finally breathe. They spent the final weeks of pregnancy in peaceful preparation, talking to their daughter, decorating her nursery, dreaming about the future. Min-ho would press his ear to Amara's belly, having full conversations with their baby, telling her stories about her mother's bravery and beauty, promising to always protect her and love her unconditionally. Amara went into labor 3 weeks before her due date, waking Min-ho at 2 in the morning with a calm. I think it's time. He went from asleep to fully alert in seconds, suddenly nervous in a way she'd never seen him. Okay, we can do this. Hospital bag. Car keys. Wait, did we pack everything? Should I call the doctor? Breathe. Min-ho, she said through a contraction. We have time. Time. His voice went up an octave. You're in labor. There's no time. There's all the time. We practiced this, remember? But all his preparation flew out the window in the face of actual labor. In the hospital, he held her hand through every contraction, wincing like he felt her pain, whispering encouragement and apologies and declarations of love. When the labor intensified and she squeezed his hand hard enough to bruise, he didn't complain once. When she cursed at him for getting her pregnant in the first place, he apologized profusely and promised to never touch her again. You better touch me again, she panted. Because we're doing this at least one more time. Their daughter was born just after dawn, screaming her arrival into the world with impressive lungs. The moment they placed her in Min-ho's arms, something fundamental shifted in the universe. He stared down at his daughter with an expression of such pure wonder and love that Amara started crying all over again. She's perfect, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. She's absolutely perfect. Look at her fingers. Look at her little nose. Amara, we made a person. We made this perfect, beautiful person. They named her Mina, after his sister, and Elena, after Amara's grandmother. Mina Elena Kang came home to a nursery full of love and a father who couldn't stop staring at her like she'd hung the moon. Min-ho was obsessed, getting up for every night feeding even though Amara insisted he needed sleep for work. I'll sleep when she's 18, he said, cradling his tiny daughter. Right now, I'm not missing a single moment. Watching him with their daughter transformed Amara's love into something even deeper. This dangerous, powerful man was reduced to putting by a 7-pound baby. He sang off-key lullabies, made ridiculous faces to earn her smiles, and cried the first time she wrapped her tiny hand around his finger. "You have my heart, baby girl," he told Mina during a 2 a.m. feeding. "You and your mama own me completely, and I wouldn't have it any other way." The first few months were exhausting and perfect. They were sleep-deprived and overwhelmed and completely in love with their tiny human. Min-ho had taken paternity leave, something unprecedented in his office, declaring that nothing was more important than these early days with his family. They spent lazy mornings in bed, Mina between them, marveling at every sound and movement she made. "Is it normal to be this obsessed?" Min-ho asked one morning, watching Mina sleep. "Because I literally cannot stop staring at her." "Completely normal," Amara assured him, though she was equally obsessed. "She's pretty amazing. She's the most amazing thing that's ever existed." His eyes moved from their daughter to his wife. "Except maybe her mother. Nice save. But seriously, look at her. She has your nose in my eyes, and she's only 6 weeks old, but I can already tell she's going to be brilliant and beautiful, and I'm going to have to fight off boys with a stick." "She's 6 weeks old. Min-ho, I'm just planning ahead." His expression turned serious. "I never knew I could love something this much. I thought what I felt for you was the limit of what my heart could hold. But this," he gestured to their sleeping daughter, "this is beyond anything I imagined. We made a family, Amara. We built something real and good and lasting. Against all odds, we found each other and created this life. How did I get so lucky?" Amara reached across Mina to cup his face. "We both got lucky, and we're going to spend the rest of our lives being grateful for it." He kissed her palm, then leaned over to press a gentle kiss to their daughter's forehead. "I promise you both," he said quietly, "every battle I've fought, every hard choice I've made, everything I've done that I'm not proud of, it led me here. To this moment, to this family. And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat because you two are worth everything." As Mina grew, so did their love. At 6 months, she giggled for the first time and Min-ho called everyone he knew to share the news. At 8 months, she started crawling and he baby-proofed the entire penthouse with an engineer's precision. At 10 months, she said her first word, "Dada," and he cried with pride while Amara pretended to be offended. "I carried her for 9 months and she says Dada first?" Totally unfair. On Mina's first birthday, they threw a small party with close friends and family. Watching their daughter smash her first birthday cake, covered in frosting and giggling with joy, Min-ho pulled Amara close. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For everything. For being brave enough to stay when I gave you every reason to run. For loving me when I didn't know how to love myself. For giving me this family, this life, this happiness I never thought I deserved." "You deserve all of it," she said firmly. "You're a good man, Min-ho. Not perfect, but good. The kind of father who drops everything for tea parties and reads the same bedtime story 17 times without complaining. The kind of husband who still looks at me like I'm the most beautiful woman in the world, even when I'm covered in baby food and haven't slept in days. The kind of man who chose love over fear and family over revenge. You deserve every bit of happiness we have." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, while their daughter played nearby, and their friends smiled, and the future stretched before them bright with promise. "This is everything," he murmured against her lips. "You and Mina, this life we've built. I don't need anything else." "Good, because you're stuck with us. Forever and always." "Forever and always," he agreed, and not a second less. Years passed in a blur of joy and chaos. They had a son 2 years after Mina, a boy they named James, who inherited his mother's smile and his father's determination. Min-ho eventually became a judge, using his position to reform the system from within, to show mercy alongside justice, to remember that everyone deserved a second chance. Amara expanded her consulting firm, building bridges between cultures and companies, making the world a little smaller and kinder. But through everything, through career changes and growing children and the normal challenges of life, their love remained constant. Min-ho still looked at Amara like she was his salvation. She still touched him like he was precious. They still chose each other, every single day, in big ways and small. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they renewed their vows in front of their children. Mina, now 9, and James, now 7, stood beside them as Min-ho once again promised to love, honor, and protect his wife for all his days. I'm going to tell you a secret, he said during his vows, addressing not just Amara but their children too. Before your mother, I was lost. I was good at my job, but empty inside. I didn't believe in love or family or anything that couldn't be proven in a courtroom. Then a bullet flew and a beautiful woman needed saving, and everything changed. She taught me that strength comes in many forms. That being vulnerable isn't weakness. That love is the bravest thing we can choose. And every day since, she's made me better. He turned to face Amara fully, taking both her hands. You are my heart, my home, my everything. You gave me the family I didn't know I needed. You showed me what it means to truly live instead of just survive. And I promise, for the next 10 years and the 10 after that, and every decade until I take my last breath, to love you with everything I am. To choose you always. To be the man you see when you look at me with those eyes full of love. Thank you for saving me, Amara. In every way a person can be saved. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Amara's vows were equally emotional, talking about the journey they'd traveled, the obstacles they'd overcome, the love that had only grown stronger with time. When they kissed, Mina cheered and James made gagging sounds, and everyone laughed because this was their family, imperfect and loud and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. That night, after the party ended and the children were asleep, Min-ho and Amara stood on their balcony overlooking Seoul. The city glittered beneath them, full of possibility and promise. His arms came around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Taking a chance on me? Never, she said immediately. Not for a single second. Even with all the danger and the threats and the fear? Especially because of that, she turned in his arms to face him. Because it proved that what we have is stronger than anything the world throws at us. We survived, Min-ho. We more than survived. We thrived. We built a beautiful life together. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. I love you, Amara Kang. More than words can express. More than actions can show. You are the reason I breathe, the reason I fight, the reason I believe in tomorrow. I love you too, she whispered. Forever and always. Forever and always, he echoed, and kissed her under the stars while the city pulsed with life below, and their children slept safe in their beds, and their love story continued, endless and unbreakable, a testament to the power of choosing each other against all odds. This was their happily ever after, earned through blood and tears and unwavering devotion. And it was everything.